Welcome to the Happy Dog, Happy Human podcast, where we explore the intersection between human mental health and our relationships with dogs. We hope you enjoy today's episode. Be sure to tune in to our afterthoughts at the end of the episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I'm a human-animal bond facilitator and bite prevention strategist. I am the founder of Human Canine Collaborative, through which I support humans and dogs in trauma recovery and nervous system healing through cultivating embodied attunement and somatic consent lifestyle practices. I'm also a licensed occupational therapist and hold a doctorate in occupational therapy with advanced clinical practice in community-based mental health. For the past 15 years, I've been working as a dog trainer and canine behavior consultant, specializing in public safety and dog bite prevention, animal assisted interventions, including activities and education with special populations, and rehabilitation for anxious, reactive, and traumatized dogs.
Hi, I'm Angela, the CEO of Cloud Doodles. We are a company that raises awareness about the benefits of dogs on mental health. We sell meaningful dog and human accessories to support our platform and to be able to give 25% of our profits to animal, dog, and mental health related charities. All of our patterns have a special mental health meaning and are designed and hand-drawn by me. I believe that every human and dog should be privy to the unconditional love they provide for each other. I hold a BA in Studio Arts and a Master's of Social Work. I am a licensed clinical social worker in the state of California, where I specialized in homelessness and severe mental illness. I currently reside in Italy with my poodle mix Duchess, my husband, and toddler. So we are going to talk about dog anxiety today, and as we do every week, I myself, Angela, will start with a pre-care exercise. So for this week, because we're continuing to talk about anxiety, I want to bring an exercise that I personally find very helpful for my own anxiety, and actually helpful for sleep issues. So if I have I'm ruminating or just thinking nonstop, having trouble settling in to go to sleep, I really like doing this exercise. So it's we're not reinventing the wheel here. It's called the body scan, and it's a mindfulness exercise. I think one of the OG mindfulness exercises. Yeah, let's just jump right in.
All right, I'm excited for this.
Okay, so let's close our eyes if we feel comfortable, or you can always leave your eyes half open. That's another way of getting in the zone. All right, so let's start with taking one deep breath and let it out. And we're going to take our focus to the top of our heads, right in the center line. And we are going to see how the top of our heads feel. Maybe our scalp is tingling. Maybe our scalp is itchy. Maybe it doesn't feel like much at all. Just notice how the top of our head feels. Is it cold? Is it hot? And now we're going to move down to our ears, both ears. What do your ears feel like in this moment? What are you hearing? Maybe you hear a buzzing coming in through the eardrums. You can feel the air going in and out. And now we will go to our eyes. We can feel the heaviness of our eyelids touching our eyeballs. Maybe we feel our eyelashes gently brushing our cheeks. And moving to our nose. How do our nostrils feel as we breathe in the cool or warm air? And how does it feel when we breathe out? Moving down to our mouths, trying to relax our tongue and our jaw, letting everything hang loose comfortably. And now we move down to our shoulders. Maybe our shoulders is a place where we hold a lot of tension. So just notice the tension and try to breathe through it. Don't judge it. Just observe. And now we're moving to our rib cage. What sensation do we feel as we breathe in and out, as they expand and deflate with our lungs? And now we move down to our lower abdomen. Maybe we've just eaten something and it's hanging out in there. Our stomach's gurgling, the acid's gurgling. Maybe it feels empty with hunger. Haven't eaten in a while. And just notice how it feels. And now we move down to our hip bones. It's another place where we can hold a lot of tension. We want to try to breathe in and out and let those spaces relax where we hold tension. Moving down to our knees. Maybe they hurt a bit from walking. Maybe they feel like they want to be stretched out or bent. Just noticing. And we move down to our feet. Maybe they're sore from walking. Maybe they feel like walking. And now to our toes. Maybe they tingle a little. Maybe we can wiggle them a little. And lastly, we're going to move back up to our hands. Each finger, the thumbs, the pointer fingers, the middle fingers, the ring fingers, the pinkies. They're such sensitive parts of our body. Maybe we can put our hands together and just feel the tingling sensation, the sensitivity of your skin on your skin. And now we're going to move back up to our nose as we get out of this practice. We're going to take one deep breath in and out. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Oh no, I can't hear you.
Oh, I muted myself. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I feel so relaxed. I was yawning.
And that's why I really like this one for sleep, honestly, because it gives, I think, like with anxiety before sleep or in the middle of the night, if you wake up or whatnot, I just find it really helpful to focus on something that's not what my head is trying to focus on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
was noticing like I wasn't thinking about other things. I was just like, oh, what's that body part feel like?
exactly.
And is that sensation there or not?
Exactly. I have another fun one. I'll actually just add it to this because it's not really a mindfulness practice. But if you do have trouble sleeping because your mind is going, one of my favorite things to do is the ABC game.
Mm.
And so you, for example, pick countries and you have to go through the whole alphabet. And it's just a really good way to get, your brain wants to be stimulated for some reason. So it's just a good way to stimulate your brain without making yourself more anxious. If that
Yeah,
makes sense.
it
And that
totally
sometimes you just fall asleep also. And you get to M and you're like snoozing.
That's such a great idea. Anxiety
Yeah.
really disrupts sleep quite a bit. So I really appreciate those tips.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it really feeds off of each other. When you're tired, you tend to be more anxious, or that's what happens to me anyway. So it's just a
Mhm.
vicious cycle.
Totally. Yeah. As soon as I try to sleep, I'm like, let me think about all the mistakes I made today.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Anyway, so dog anxiety.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Dog anxiety.
I think this is a really interesting topic. And I think it's a topic that a lot of people are interested in because I think it's a common occurrence in dogs.
Yeah,
Do you agree with that?
I do. Yeah, pretty much every dog I've worked with has had some type of anxiety or some symptom of anxiety, whether it's chronic or just like one day, you know.
Why do you think that is?
Why do dogs have so much anxiety?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in my line of work, I'm usually working with dogs that have uh, behaviors that are not conducive to whatever uh, functional behaviors that they need to be doing. Or it's like the behavior has become a problem in the home and is impacting the human's ability to get through their day and do the things that they need to be doing. So I'm seeing a population of dogs that it has behaviors that are not like working out right. And so
Mm.
I think that's why most of the ones I see are coming in with some kind of anxiety. Um, but I think looking at the whole population of dogs, dogs are, dogs are domesticated. They live in our homes with us, and they also have status as property. In some countries, that's actually changing, which is really exciting to see. But mostly they have status as property, which means they don't have rights of their own. They don't get to decide whether or not they want to live with you, or whether they want to go, play in the field, or
Mm.
go take a walk at a certain time. Sometimes we have to decide when the walk is going to happen, or what time eating is happening, or all of these things. So dogs don't get a lot of choices or opportunity to decide for themselves what's happening to them. And I think that right there can create a condition for anxiety.
That makes a lot of sense because if you
Mhm.
feel like you don't have control or agency, it's going to make you feel anxious
Yes.
naturally.
I do. I have a lot of anxiety when I feel like I don't have a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. Well, and it's also to tie back what we were talking about last episode is in humans, generalized anxiety or anxiety disorders in general are the most common mental disorder. So
Mhm.
I guess it also makes sense that we would see that in dogs most commonly because we are quite similar.
hmm Yeah, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it could also be the case that the human state of anxiety is contributing to the dog's perception of whether or not they are safe. So they could feel anxious because we feel anxious, or when we feel anxious. I was frustrated about something this morning, and I went like, ugh. And Muggins like was worried. They came right over and were like trying to cheer me up, or like trying to know what was happening. So all of our subtle emotional changes, and the way we breathe, and also the chemical changes in our bodies that occur when we're anxious or stressed, dogs are attuned to all of that. So they're learning about whether or not they are safe by being attuned to us, and noticing our state.
It's really interesting you say that. This is a little bit of a tangent, but always. I read this research article about how wolves and dogs differ
Mhm.
in their relationship with us.
Mm,
And one of the things they notice with dogs is that even if we have a treat, a wolf will be looking at the treat, but the dogs are looking at us. And so they
mm,
are constantly scanning what we are doing and feeling and what is expected of them from us.
mhm,
And so that's one, I think, why they're such amazing support animals for us because they're just so in tune with us.
mhm.
Um, but I also see how it can flip to the other side with them that we are affecting them a lot.
Mm, yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. I believe dogs exist because of that genetic difference from wolves, that they pay attention to us, they have a desire to be with us and to communicate with us. And that's why they exist.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very unique relationship. Like you don't have that with cats, for example. And
Mhm,
um, but yeah, in the terms of just the attunement, like how connected we are to them.
mhm.
Um, Yeah. So it makes sense like that we play off of each other with our anxieties as well.
Mhm.
And that our nervous systems, as you were saying last week, that they speak, our nervous systems speak to each other. But it's especially interesting that a dog and a human is going to have that interaction much more strongly because we're so connected.
Yeah, exactly. I think dogs um, can almost be more attuned to us than other humans are in certain
Absolutely.
ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So maybe my anxiety is what made Duchess anxious, is what you're saying.
Well, I don't know that you're causing it, you know? I think it's a complex factor, you know, like the dog's nervous system could be predisposed to anxiety or they're coming in with their own baggage, you know, if you rescue a dog from a shelter, they've had some trauma or some neglect that they're dealing with. So their nervous systems can contribute to ours just as much as ours contributes to theirs. So I wouldn't encourage somebody to think about whose fault it is, you know, I
No,
don't
of
think it's
course.
anybody's
Yeah.
fault.
Well, and it's interesting that you say, even just where a dog is coming from, but even I just immediately am thinking about Duchess's size, right? The small dog versus
Mm,
big dog.
mhm,
Um, I think I think we've all noticed that smaller dogs tend to be more reactive, but
mhm.
it also makes a lot of sense because of their size and that the world is scary being that
Yeah,
small. Um, so
yeah.
they're more uncomfortable and nervous that they're going to get stepped on or bit, or the door will open them and hit them, or they're just letting us know more because they're nervous about those things happening to them.
Yeah, yeah, they really have to speak up for themselves a lot more to protect their space and their body. And I mean, I'm a small person, so I have like my perspective of being small in the world, but dogs are much smaller than I am. So I can only imagine how overwhelming that could be.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's interesting. I mean, because we always do that where we think about small dogs, like, oh, they're so barky and yappy, and
Mhm.
I remember when I first got Duchess, I was like, she's not going to be a small dog. Like, I will beat that out of her by like, I would do things at the beginning where I was like, I'm not going to pick her up because that's how small dogs end up getting super spoiled.
Mm,
But it is also true that with small dogs, they feel so much safer when they're in your arms, and that's okay.
yeah.
Actually, I have a great example. So today we had some people delivering our new couch, which you can see
Mhm,
behind me. And I knew that this would be a situation that makes Duchess anxious.
mhm.
So my friend was here and I had my friend just pick her up. And my friend was actually, it was really sweet, was walking with her in the backyard talking to her. And she
Aw.
came back to me and she said, Duchess is so calm, like in my arms. She's not like squirming or anything.
Hmm.
And I said, yeah, but that's what she needs right now. Like there's these strange men in her house and she's trying to protect it, but you're just holding her close. And so she's completely fine.
Wow.
So that was a moment where it's like, yeah, this is good for her to be picked up and to be elevated and close to
Mhm,
someone. When generally, like, she would feel so anxious running around these tall men, barking at them,
mm,
unsure where to go, what to do. Are they supposed to be here? I can see what she's thinking, like, as this is happening. So,
yeah.
um, but I mean, she's 7 at this point, and I know her triggers so well. So I'm much better at just dealing with them and knowing like what she needs in that moment um,
Mhm,
to deal with them. And mind you, I don't always pick her up. Like sometimes I do say, okay, like we're gonna go over here to this person, and they're gonna give you treats, and we're gonna introduce you correctly
mhm,
so that you feel comfortable with them. Um,
mm,
because at the same time, like I think one of the hardest things of having an anxious dog was the feeling like I can't do things because of her,
mm,
and that gives me anxiety also. Like I'm much better at it now, but I used to have very bad FOMO, fear of missing
mhm.
out, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah.
And I just felt like there were so many things that I couldn't do with her, or, there were points where I felt like I couldn't have people over because she was going to bite someone or just go
Mhm,
crazy every time someone walks in the house.
mhm,
Um, And that feels really limiting. And, feeling like I couldn't take her out for walks because she's going to freak out.
Mm,
Um, but I think I learned like I have to do it anyway, and that there's other ways to help her get acclimated to things
mm,
that trigger her. But it's a
mhm.
dance, right? Because like today, again, a perfect example of like I don't need her to get acclimated to strange men moving a sofa into the house,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
right? Like at
Mhm.
that point, okay, I'm just going to help you feel safe.
Right.
But if you have, for example, like a new friend come over, I would like her to get used to them, and I
Mm,
would like her to introduce her to them because they'll be coming over a lot. So it's more
yeah,
important to me
right.
that she feels comfortable
Mhm.
and
Yeah, yeah,
not bite them.
exactly. Develop a relationship, really. That's the
Yeah.
difference. Like some people, she's not going to develop a relationship with because they're just coming to bring the couch in. And I love how you anticipated that she would feel anxious about that, and you delegated
Yeah.
to somebody, which is awesome. Like, I need some help. Can you do this specific thing? And then that was taken care of, and you could pay attention to the people moving the couch.
Exactly. And I think that that's what you were saying before, like with her, I mean, I'm also a mom of a 2-year-old. And so there are a lot of moments in the day that can feel very overwhelming. And
Hmm.
so, like, let's take the example of the couch. And I was lucky that I had a friend here today.
Yeah.
But with Duchess, like, my wish is for her to just like not do those things and just go
Mm,
away and let me deal with what I need to deal with.
yeah.
Um, and sometimes in my overwhelm, like if this situation were to happen, I didn't think about her, then she gets more overwhelmed and more reactive. And then I get more overwhelmed. And it just turns into this whole back and forth. And I'm
Mm,
huffing and puffing. And
mhm.
I'm like, Duchess, no, Duchess, no. And then my 2-year-old is saying, Duchess, no, Duchess, no. And it just turns into a whole fiasco. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I think the lesson there is that it's just better to plan for triggers if you can,
Mm.
than to just let them happen. But I mean, of course, you can't always do that. I mean, I have strangers,
Oh,
like people come to your house. What are you supposed to do? It's hard.
right.
It's
Yeah,
really hard.
it's
Like
really hard.
it's hard to deal with a dog with anxiety for sure, and to help them deal with it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I struggle with it a lot. And especially it's weird. I get this like especially with cloud doodles, we're talking about how dogs are good for our mental health, but Duchess sometimes definitely increases my anxiety.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. I think that can happen a lot where, you think about all the benefits of having a dog, and there's this emotional support dog idea that could be helpful for specifically for mental health. But dogs are living beings, so they don't always behave the same way. They're not always predictable. They are individuals who have their own needs, so just because they could be supportive doesn't mean they are, especially if they don't have their own support. Like I think
Yeah,
about myself as a therapist, like I can't be supportive to someone else unless I am supported myself.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. And yeah, they can't just give and give. They also need um to be given something.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Muggins, you said Muggins, he also was a bit reactive or is still?
Muggins came to me very reactive. He was a puppy when I first adopted him, and and he was having trouble getting adopted because he was
Uh,
very bitey, and he was 3 months old and really wanted to interact with people, but was just like his mouth was just going constantly. And i I had seen this before, and so I recognized that he had hypersensitivities in some of his senses, like touch and vision and hearing. And he had been in a shelter, and a very nice shelter. Granted, there was like a trainer, and the staff would take him out of his room and bring him into the office so that he could get extra attention. He got a lot of training and attention, and it was like really clean and nice, but also it was a shelter. So there were like the staff would go home at 5 p.m. and not come back until 7 a.m. the next
Mm.
day. And so he was alone for all of that time. And all day during the day, the lights are on, and there's a lot of noise, from other animals or people walking around or cleaning happening. And so he was, I think, overstimulated and had difficulty with eating because there was so much time when he was alone and not having a structure, for when should eating happen or when should sleeping happen and things like that. So he came to me kind of like really dysregulated and all over the place, and just not even sure how to interact with people. And luckily, we've been able to establish a daily routine, and I gave him a lot of structure and would make sure that he had naps during the day away from light and sound so he could really sleep. And then we worked on the eating a lot. So eating was something that was really challenging and can be really challenging for dogs that are anxious. I see a lot of dogs that don't have an appetite, or that get irritable, like there's a level of hunger that could be so intense or even uncomfortable,
Mm.
because the digestive system is so disrupted with anxiety. So sometimes it can be painful to feel hungry, or there's cramping or bloating, or just lack of appetite. And that can impact the dog's behavior. That if they feel uncomfortable, they're going to behave irritably. Muggins would get really like demanding and barky and bitey when he was hungry, especially when he didn't know how to tell me he was hungry, and maybe I missed the initial signs. So he got hungrier and hungrier before food was available. Um,
What do you think the bitey, like when you say bitey, I'm imagining like little puppies nipping your fingers,
mhm.
like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So what do you think, why do you think that behavior comes out of anxiety, or like what is it? Where is that stemming from?
Well, I think with a puppy, it's stemming from like a couple of different places. One could be hunger, like lack of impulse control also in a youngster,
Mm.
or at 3 months old, puppies are exploring with their mouths. They don't really have control over the force of their bite yet, and they're wanting to put things in their mouths in order to learn about them. And also like chasing things that move. Like if you move your hands around them, they're like, oh, is that a toy? I'm going to grab
Right.
it. So many reasons. But I would notice that that behavior would become more intense when Muggins was very hungry. So that
Interesting.
would be a sign that, okay, he just needs to eat right now.
But he was anxious, so he was having trouble eating. That's interesting.
Yes, exactly. So there would be times I would put the food down and he would go over to it and seem hungry, but then like he would like smell it and back away. Like it wasn't, he was like had this back and forth or this struggle
Oh,
with
interesting. Like you could
eating.
witness the struggle.
Yeah, and sometimes he
Yeah.
would even try to bury the food, but there wasn't any dirt there. So that's called a displacement behavior, because burying something is a normal behavior for a dog to do, but it was happening out of context because there was no actual dirt there to bury the food.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Okay. Because Duchess sometimes does like digging, but I think it's more she's doing it to get comfortable.
Oh, like digging before she lays down somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I remember when we crate trained her or tried, we didn't end up really doing it. She really didn't like the crate at all.
Hmm.
She would try to dig herself out.
Oh, wow.
So the only way we could end up crate training her was without closing the door,
Yeah,
which was fine. I
yeah.
mean, she would chill in there, but we could never get to the point where it was okay to close the door with her.
Yeah,
Um,
she was worried about not being able to get out.
I think so, yeah, which is anxiety, right? Also, like there were just certain things with her with like regular training that just didn't work, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
yeah,
Where like these behavioral modification trainers are like, this should work. It just never did.
it didn't. Yeah.
And I don't know, is that because she's anxious? I mean, I think I was as consistent as I could be. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't
Well, I
know.
think Muggins also had difficulty with the crate. And um, so when he was little, he would I I would put him in the crate and he would go in there. But then as he was getting bigger, he didn't like the crate as much, and then eventually he just refused to go in. And so with sensory sensitivities, I think about space and like spatial awareness a lot. So the amount of space one needs in order to feel comfortable can be different depending on how visually sensitive you are or how sensitive your touch system is. And so Muggins seems to need a lot of space. And so the bigger he
Interesting.
got, the less comfortable he was in the crate. And so we couldn't use it anymore. And that was the same thing in the car. We had been using a crate in the car. And then eventually he was
Mm.
like, no, I can't do that anymore. It doesn't feel right. And then we
That-
even tried to go camping and he didn't feel comfortable in the tent. So it's the
oh,
same kind of
because he's
thing.
really big also. So that's like
Yeah.
yeah, like space is important for him, which also just makes
Mhm.
sense for bigger
Yeah,
dogs.
exactly.
It's really interesting though that I actually, I don't know, this popped into my head right now that we have these ideas of how dogs should be trained or what they like should be able to do. Like, for
Mhm.
example, most people are like, crate train your dog. That's what they need to do. They'll
Mhm.
do it if you like are consistent enough or
Mhm.
if you do these commands enough, like they will
Mhm.
do it. I put commands in quotes, by the way, for
Yeah.
those of you who are just listening. Um,
Mhm. I like to
so
say cues.
yeah,
Cues
cues.
is
Thank
what
you. I
they
forgot the word. That's why I put commands in quotes.
I got
Right,
you.
cues. Yeah, like certain cues need to be that they should be able to do these things and that they're not a quote unquote good dog if they don't complete these
Mm,
things.
mhm,
And for any parents out there, like I am equating this to babies because
mm,
we also have these expectations of babies of like what they should be able to do. And I
mhm.
know as a new parent how crazy that drove me because my child didn't necessarily fall under these like standards of what babies should be doing. And they're all different.
Wow.
And we clearly we do that to dogs also, that they should be able to follow these expectations or there's something wrong with them.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's such a good point. Or like, yeah, because they're a dog, this is what they should be able to do.
Exactly. Or like if you teach them this, like they will do this, but not like I think about even leaving dogs alone. Like there are some dogs that just will never be able, they need somebody with them. Like they
Hmm.
just do. That's just
Yeah.
the way it is.
Right.
Um, I've known some people with dogs like that, right? And there are some that like, yeah, okay, they can handle like the 8 hour workday of someone being away and someone coming out to walk them, or they have a dog door to go to the bathroom or whatnot.
Yeah.
But again, it's like I equate it to babies. I'm thinking about baby sleep in particular because it's very
Mm,
popular to sleep train, which just some babies are just not able to sleep in their crib. They need to
mhm.
sleep on top of you. And like that's
Yeah.
just the way it is. And trying to force them to sleep in the crib requires to do something that's quite unnatural, which is for their mother and father to walk
Mhm.
away from them and let them cry until they give up. And
Mm,
um, like I'm personally just very against that. That's my
mhm.
opinion, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking that we do that same thing to dogs, like as well.
Yeah, yeah. This is reminding me of the gender binary and how we, like, when we're born, we have certain body parts, and then society decides, oh, you're supposed to be like this because that's the body part that you have, And I've always felt really frustrated by that, like I haven't ever felt like, oh yes, I'm a girl, so this is the way I am and that works for me. I've always been like, no, I want to just be who I am and not have to be fitted into this box that society tells me I'm supposed to be. And
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
yeah, it's very similar with
It is. I mean, and I think it goes back. I think I was having a conversation the other day about just human needs to categorize.
Mhm.
And we do it with dogs too. Like you're a pet and that's the category. So, and you're a small dog. So what you should do is like sit on my lap and you're adorable like when you bark, even though, like, okay, maybe it's best for me, but like Duchess can be really scary when she barks and people don't believe that she actually could bite. And
Yeah.
she never bites down. It's always out of fear. So it's always like a nip,
Yeah.
but like she's drawn blood from people's fingers because they put their
Mm.
finger in her face,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
um but people are like, oh, that's so cute. I'm like, not really. Like, and then
Yeah.
you have the flip side of that, right? But yeah, we just want to categorize everything. So small white fluffy dog, like this is what you are. Like big Muggins
Mhm.
tree, what is he, a tree climber?
Tree walker coonhound.
Tree walker
Yes.
coonhound, like you should do this, like this is
Right.
your role, uh
Mhm.
golden retriever, you're the sweet family dog.
Yeah.
Not always, right? Like
Right.
it's just they're all independent and all unique and individual, just like people, but we have such a hard time as a society and culture and human, I think it's human nature to just um have nuance, I guess, put
Mhm.
nuance to that there is nuance in an individual or in a creature or in a
Mhm.
concept.
Yeah, individual expression. I mean, each person and or being has their own unique way of being in the world, and like there are as many genders as there are human beings. Each one is unique and beautiful and wonderful, and we should be able to express ourselves however we want. And also for dogs are all unique individuals, and they should get to express their full dogness however is right for them.
Speaking of gender and dogs, this is let's fuse them together. I have a
Uh-huh.
story. So Duchess likes to pee with her leg up, and she
Oh.
also marks
Hmm.
everything
Yeah.
with her leg up. And people always say, "But she's a girl dog," and I'm like, "So?" Like
Hmm.
she wants to mark her territory, and she can pee however
Yeah.
she wants. If she wants to put her leg
Yes.
up, let her put her leg up.
Right? Yeah. So even the gender binary like causes us to think
Yeah.
about, oh, this dog should be that way because they have, oh, that body part. But you're right.
100%. Yeah. And so that they should be peeing this certain way or whatever. Or
Hmm. Or a male dog or a dog with a penis is not man enough if they don't lift their leg.
exactly. Yeah. That I mean, and so that happens with dogs too. I also know, especially because I'm working in the with the dog accessories, like we
Hmm.
have that happens all the time with the dogs we know that buy our products. So we have one product that's beige, and
Mm-hmm.
it's actually, to me, it's like quote unquote unisex, but a lot of dogs that wear the beige color get called girls. Or I know some dog owners who put pink on their male dogs because they like it.
Hmm.
And people come up to them. I've heard these stories that come up to a male dog wearing pink and saying, "Oh, isn't she cute?" And then somebody says, "Well, actually, it's a boy dog."
Hmm.
And they say, but then why is he wearing pink? So it's
Wow.
unbelievable the way we just
Hmm.
project this onto everything,
Yeah,
absolutely everything.
totally. Yeah. I wanted to say something about speaking of anxiety with Duchess lifting her leg. I have
Ooh.
noticed that dogs who seem to have a fear of other dogs or are anxious about socializing with other dogs, they tend to lift their leg more often. Because
Hmm.
the reason a dog is lifting their leg or marking is to communicate with another dog. So that behavior is tied up in a social construct or a social environment. Um,
That's really interesting because she goes up to other dogs and will sniff them and do whatever. And
mhm,
then she'll pee, and then which is fairly normal, I'm assuming.
mhm.
But then she starts doing this crazy thing where she's like, ruff, 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 and
And she's
like
scratching her feet
scratching
on the ground.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if
yeah.
is that anxiety or is that normal?
Well, it's normal. Dogs will scratch the ground where they've urinated or defecated to sort of make a sign that says, right here is where my message is that I left for you.
But she really does a whole song and dance. Like
Mhm.
it's extremely exaggerated.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it could be. I I was training a dog once who was really, really terrified of other dogs. And I remember we went for maybe a half-mile walk, and the dog lifted their leg about 25 times. I counted. So that
That's
was really
so
excessive.
interesting. Okay, because
Yeah.
she may that might be an anxious behavior then, because she 100 always been like that. Marks, 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 and marks a lot
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. That's
When
interesting.
there's no pee coming out, she's just
Right.
marking. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a almost a compulsive behavior, like, I have to do this thing. I have to, there's another dog around. I have to do this. Like, and without
Yes.
really thinking about it.
And I wonder if it's actually really, I don't know if it's related to other dogs or she's just feeling anxious because I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know
hard
if
to
there's,
tell because
I
like the
think she's
environment.
just feeling anxious, to be honest. Because
Mm,
I'm thinking like even if we're going for walks here and there are no other dogs, she's just doing that.
that's a good point. Like, what is the difference between I'm afraid of that one dog? Well, I guess I'm going to tell you the difference. The difference between fear and anxiety. So, like, if there's one thing in the environment and your dog is behaving fearfully toward that one thing, and then once that thing is gone, they're fine, that would be more of a fear response. I'm afraid of that particular dog. But anxiety is more of a prolonged anticipation that something could scare me, but the something might not be there at the time.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting to think about it that way.
Hmm.
Um, it makes me think like the particular behavior I'm thinking about with Duchess, because that's all, of course, I have to refer to when I think about anxious dogs. It makes me think about her barking and like not growling, but that little like ruff, ruff bark
Hmm.
that she does. That I, we talked about this once on a live about her barking at nothing, but
Mm.
now it's making me think that maybe it's almost in anticipation of something.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really making me think that maybe that's what's going on with her. Sometimes, maybe not all the time.
Yeah.
Um, because she is just very, but it's weird. She goes between these two states of being like totally, like her sleep is not disturbed at all by anxiety. Like she's just out.
Nice.
And then, but then goes between states of being like super on edge and then to that. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, it depends like where we are, what we're doing.
Yeah.
Um, But she's so interesting. Like the other night, there was this humongous thunderstorm, huge. Like I was scared. And she and my husband were just sitting on the balcony watching the thunderstorm. And she's
Wow.
like totally chill. She's like, all right, whatever. He videotaped it too.
Oh,
I
nice.
was just astonished. And there were our neighbors' dogs even ran into, they were terrified. They ran into our
Oh,
backyard and Duchess was just like, yeah, cool.
oh,
It's thunderstorm. So it's like,
yeah.
usually you would think of an anxious dog having anxiety about those things or
Mhm.
fireworks. She's not anxious about them at all.
That's great.
Curious. I just
Mhm.
interested. I think it just again speaks to the individuality of like the nature of anxiety too and how it manifests in people.
Yeah, and it could be like specific to certain situations, like social anxiety. Like, I get anxious about going to a party or speaking in public, or you know something like that that's specifically associated with social interaction, but not being anxious about sounds in the
Exactly.
environment that I know
Yeah.
what they are, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And actually for Duchess, I think it is mostly about social or like strange people
Mm,
coming into the house or
hmm.
strange people walking by us or
Yeah.
um, sometimes strange dogs, but it's more people actually. So,
Interesting.
but that does make, I mean, we all have, I also the other day was thinking about my own anxiety before I was medicated. Thank you, Lexapro. Was very much about natural disasters.
Oh,
And to
wow.
tie this all back to what we were talking about at the beginning,
Mhm,
I was just analyzing myself because that's what I do in
mhm.
my spare time. Um, I was thinking about how the reason that makes me so anxious is because it's so out of my control and it's so much
Mm,
bigger than me. So,
mhm,
for example, that storm, it started making me a little anxious. And I used to have a lot of intrusive thoughts about it. Now, I was making the joke about being medicated, but it has helped those intrusive thoughts like
Mm.
go away, or maybe I have them a little bit, but I'm easily like, that's not going to happen. Like the likelihood of
Mm.
that happening is so little. I can just move past it much quicker. Like that's been my experience with medication and why I take it.
Mhm.
It just makes it easier to use my coping skills.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was thinking about why would I manifest into this particular anxiety? So I don't have social anxiety, for example, at all.
Mm.
Um, but with this, I do because being in a social environment, I actually don't feel out of control. I feel very
Mm.
in control
Mhm.
because of how I am. Like I feel like confident that I can get people to like me. Like maybe I'm insecure
Mm.
later, but I just yeah, I just feel. I think it has to do with control. Like I think that's what I'm getting to, and I think full circle. Also, we were talking about the dogs. Also,
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
much of their anxiety is because of lack of control. So think about what I'm
Yeah.
saying with Duchess. She has no control over the door opening.
Right.
Zero. She has no control over that. No real choice in it
Mhm.
because I need to open the door, and like that's going to happen eventually.
Mhm.
Um, but one of the things actually one of my trainers had taught me was, and which we still do, is that I don't open the door until she's calm. So
Nice.
we work on that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't do it. Like that's the truth. We can't all be
Sure.
perfect. I have to
Mhm.
get to the door and I open it. And you know what? It doesn't work out very well in the end because she goes bark, bark,
Mhm.
bark straight for the person and
Wow.
bumps into them. This happened to me the other day.
Mm.
Ran into their legs. And actually, it was kind of funny because it shocked her out of it. She was
Oh,
like,
interesting.
oh, what happened?
Whoops.
And then she wasn't anxious anymore. She stopped barking. She was like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you brought up both the medication and the control because those are two really important factors with treating anxiety and supporting individuals with anxiety. So, with the control, I think about like Muggins definitely has the nervous system makeup to be a reactive dog, but I don't think of Muggins as an anxious dog. But I think he could have definitely been an anxious dog, but really he just reacts to very specific stimulation, like other dogs or rabbits or the doorbell. But one of the reasons I think he developed that way is because I give him a lot of control over what's happening to him. And this is something that I've been learning about in the past couple of years, but that I didn't think about as much before that, because I didn't think about the level of complexity that dogs actually can achieve in their communication with us. So, for example, with Muggins, I practice something called cooperative care, which means training a dog for hygiene care or physical touch or medical treatment in a way that they can give a signal that they're ready for it to happen.
Mm.
And you can give them specific information about what it is you want to do. And then the dog also has a choice over how long it happens for or when it stops. So I'll do this for with Muggins for teeth brushing or nail trimming, where I'll show him the tools that we are going to use, like the toothbrush or the nail trimmer, and then he can decide whether he wants to do that activity or not. And if he wants to do it, then he gives me a specific cue that he's ready for.
How does he do that? Like what's an
He
example?
does a chin rest. So he'll be laying in front of me, and then
Mm.
when he's ready, he puts his head down.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. The more I've done it, the more I've realized how specific he is. So he will, like, if he wants me to trim his feet, he'll put his paws like right up to my lap and he will put one paw or the other, like he has a choice over which one he wants me to do.
That's amazing.
And he also will put his head down in different places to sort of negotiate what's going to happen. So if we're doing teeth brushing and he puts his head down straight in front of me, then I know he's ready for me to then touch his muzzle or lift his lip. But sometimes he'll put his head down and it's like a little bit to the side. And that I've learned means I don't want you to brush my teeth, but I want to keep hanging out with you.
So it's like, but it's just nonverbal communication, and you've given him
Yeah.
the tools to, I mean, he has the ability to not communicate verbally, of course, but you've like encouraged it basically, or
Yeah.
helped it grow by listening and
Mm-hmm.
responding to the
Exactly.
cues that he's giving in the first place.
Right. Yeah. So it's like a skill development for both of us. He's learned to say certain things in certain ways. And then I've learned, oh, this means this, but when you do it a little bit differently, it means something completely different.
Interesting.
Hmm.
I just can't. So I was just thinking about Duchess and trying to get her in the shower. Like, I
Mm.
could never imagine that happening without me putting her in it.
Like she wouldn't walk in on her own.
No, never.
Mm.
But maybe, I don't know. I've never
Yeah.
tried. I mean, I think that's why
Right.
it's interesting. And again, this is not like an anxiety trigger. It's just an I don't like it. She
Yeah.
doesn't like water.
Right.
Strange poodle, but she doesn't
Mhm.
like water,
Yeah.
which is hard. And I don't know what she doesn't like specifically about it. Like if we really dug
Mhm.
into it, like maybe she doesn't like how she feels afterwards or when the
Right.
water's like not on her. I think it's more that actually because I know
Yeah.
her.
Right. Or the
She doesn't like
sound. Like, are you running the water while she's in the room, or is it already prepared before she gets there?
depends.
Mhm.
She goes to a groomer more than I bathe her, so
Oh, yeah.
it's just not something we do that much also. So that's
Mhm.
also, I don't know, that might play a role in it too. But
Yeah.
if I do turn the shower on, she's like under the bed.
Oh, interesting.
There have been points where I'm like trying to get her out with treats, but like if a treat doesn't get her out, like I know she really doesn't want to do something. So I definitely have just been
Yeah.
like, okay, we'll do this a different day because this is not
Mhm.
working.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Well, it's
know?
nice that you're like, okay, you don't wanna distress her by forcing her
Yeah, well,
to
and
do
then
it.
and then we talked about earlier, then it's stressing me out too. Like it's a
Yeah.
whole cycle. I'm like, come on, just like do what I want. Like
Mhm.
I have things to do. Hurry up, and it's just not helpful for
Mhm.
anybody in that situation. Um,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
I want to go back. I think it's interesting what you say about what you were saying that I was thinking about again, nature versus nurture. So if we are
Mm.
born with certain anxious genes, how could we curve away from fully developing like clinical anxiety?
Mhm.
And I like what you're saying that like I think helping people feel or dogs more, giving them more options to feel in control or
Mhm.
have choices over what is going on in their lives while they're, growing up or even later. I mean, I'm thinking about as a therapist, that's something I often did with my clients was
Mhm.
if something is out of control because things are we don't have control over our lives, like how
Right.
can we feel in control in these situations even if it's in small ways.
Right.
So that is like definitely a coping strategy that I always talked about and how wonderful to have done that for Muggins as he was growing up
Mhm.
because then it really gets ingrained and you don't have to unlearn behaviors or just learning
Yeah.
behaviors.
Yeah.
um, Whereas, like, with Duchess now at 7, like she has to unlearn behaviors
Mm.
that she has been doing for so long. And that was part of what happened with us also is that it took me 2 years to really be like, we need help.
Mm.
And it's not that it was too late, but that her behaviors had become so ingrained that it's like I was talking about earlier with my own thoughts about
Mhm.
being scared of natural disasters, like it
Yeah.
kind of becomes her initial reaction.
Right. Yeah, it's a habit.
Always.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, not always, but that's why when we have talked about CBD and the way that CBD has helped her so much is that I've noticed now that that isn't always her initial reaction. Sometimes she doesn't have the reaction in
Mhm.
certain situations that used to always be a trigger.
Yeah.
So that's why I've noticed that that's been helpful. And again, CBD is a type of anti-anxiety medication, like what we were talking
Mhm.
about with my Lexapro, that it becomes something that it helps calm your nervous system to a point that you can use your coping skills more
Yes.
effectively.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it. I have been taking a beta blocker called propanolol for my
Mm.
anxiety, which is something that it's a blood pressure medication. So it prevents your heart rate from getting like faster and prevents your blood pressure from going up. So it helps me to be able to do activities like speak in public or go to a family gathering or something and not have my heartbeat pounding. So I
Mm,
can, like you said, I can use my coping strategies. I can ask for information, or I can ask for space, or I can say, I'm going to take a break now. And my body is not like taking over the
right.
situation.
Right, because that's another thing. I always use this analogy when I was practicing therapy with clients. If you take a scale of 0 to 10 and you get past a 7, you are so your nervous system and your fight flight response, whatever, is so hyper aroused that it's pretty much impossible to stop it.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of let it pass at
Hmm.
that point. um I'm thinking like for Duchess, which that happens to her as she goes past the 7, and she just stops listening. She
Yeah.
won't recall, she doesn't care about the treats. And
Mhm.
for me to go snap her out of it, it takes me walking over and being like, hello, like in her face.
Mhm.
And then she'll be like, oh mommy, sorry,
Mhm.
I don't know what happened there, right?
Yeah.
But it takes like a very intense like cutoff for her to go back down, or
Mhm.
for me to physically remove her. And that happens to humans too. Like I think of a panic attack like that. Like once I pass the 7, I just have to wait till it goes away, or I have to take a Xanax, or I have to,
Mhm.
um, yeah, there's just, I can't use my coping skills. I can't think rationally at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of people shy away from medication for dogs. It's seen as this like, oh, I don't know, it's like a crutch, I guess, or there's a stigma around it. Like, oh, I don't want to do that to my dog. It's not that bad, you know. But medication can help you to make more progress, and also it can alleviate the physiological effects of anxiety or stress that your dog is going through that can really be damaging to their being, and their quality of life. So I think it's really important to talk to a veterinarian and explore what the options are, make sure also that there's not any underlying pain or physical issue that could be contributing, and then to see if there's some sort of pharmacological intervention or medication that can support the training process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it goes the same for people too.
Mhm.
Like, and I love how you're saying you need to rule out other things that might be going on, because in human beings also, like there might be some underlying medical issues that are happening.
Mhm.
So it's so important to always like link in a third party professional. I think I'm gonna
Mhm.
call it that.
Yeah.
Um, to make sure that you're covering all your bases. And I love how you're, you know, destigmatizing using these medications for dogs, because I take, like we said, I take medication myself, but I definitely have had anxiety about giving Duchess anything, which actually talking to you helped me just go forward with the CBD,
Mhm.
because I felt like she doesn't have a choice in it, which made me feel like she doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But sometimes we also like we talked about this in the last thing, like they are our dependents in a way, like
Mhm.
that they are like our children. We have to make sometimes executive decisions for their health.
Right.
Just like with children, we give them as much agency as they can, but also if they want to eat a wheel of cheese for dinner, like that's not good for them, and we can't let them do
Right.
that, right? Like we need to
Yeah.
negotiate something
Yeah.
around that.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So,
Right, yeah, we have to create an environment in which they can choose, but they're not going to be harmed by the choices that they make. So sometimes we're facilitating um, some of the choices, or only providing certain choices so that anything they choose is a good thing.
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I just appreciate, and I also appreciate the idea of like sometimes we think medication might harm, but really what harms more is continuing to have the anxiety
Yeah.
for dog and human. And
Mhm.
I think I tell a lot of people who start suffering from like any clinical mental illness,
Mhm.
they will get worse. They don't get better. We have to intervene. And with intervention, you have so much improvement. with many
Mhm.
different kinds of intervention. But if you don't do anything at all, it will only get worse.
Yeah.
And that's really important to be aware of, like when you yourself might be experiencing anxiety, or if you see your dog is having anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really great point. And just like the level of support or the type of support that's needed, it can vary from one
Yeah.
situation to the next, but to make sure that if there's a behavior problem or an anxiety with the dog, that we're not just supporting the dog, we're also supporting the human because they're living it, and they're experiencing it and they're being affected by it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were just, well, actually, I can bring up another dog. My friend has an Australian Shepherd and she's getting married. And the Australian Shepherd, I actually keep referring her to you. I'm going to keep pushing it because the Australian Shepherd, which we talked about, is one of the most anxious prone dogs.
Mm,
And she has
mhm,
very, very severe anxiety. And that's only getting worse. Her name
mhm.
is Bialy. And now it's like, she's having a lot of resource guarding with children, and
Mm,
they feel like they can't take her anywhere. And she's having a wedding and she really wanted Bialy to be there, but obviously that's not a good environment to have her in.
yeah,
Um, but it's gotten to the point where they feel like they want to go camping, but if there's other dogs at the campsite,
right.
Bialy goes crazy. Or even they tried to have a dog sitter come and she bit the dog sitter. And so the
Mhm,
more that these things start to happen, the more my friend is like retreating and not wanting to leave the house. And then, even with the wedding now, her husband to be is going to have to stay an extra time with the dog where they live while she goes to the venue. So it's like really affecting their life also and
yeah,
what's going on with their life. And that's really hard, like
it's so
really hard
hard.
for them.
Yeah, it's so
Um,
hard. It's so hard to feel torn between including your dog in something, like spending time with your dog, and then doing something that you really want to do that's really important. I think it's also important to um, recognize that it's okay for dogs to not join these
yes,
activities. It's
absolutely.
okay for you to enjoy an activity that your dog is not a part of. Me and my partner, we've been intentionally working on having a consistent date night that Muggins is not involved in, which is
Yeah.
good for everybody because Muggins needs to practice being by himself.
Yeah.
And also, me and my partner need time for ourselves without Muggins. And sure, we would love to be able to take Muggins out to eat sometimes or go have a picnic in a park or whatever when there's a summer concert in the park. But maybe that's not what Muggins would really enjoy. And also, it's
No.
stressful for me to try to turn that into a family outing or a training session because I don't get to relax when that's
Right, exactly. And that's not fun if
yeah,
you.
yeah.
And also again, like even what I'm thinking about weddings. I went to one recently and there was sweetest lab. He's 2 years old, lots of energy. But you
Mhm.
know what? He was so dead at the end of the wedding. He was just
Mhm.
passed out. And it was almost like it was too much for him.
Yeah,
And even his owner was with him, like having him put his head on her lap. And she was like, I'm sorry, buddy. Like I'm like really pushed you. And he's not a reactive dog. He loves everybody. He's like licking everyone. But that's a pretty intense event for a dog to
yeah.
be a part of. So many
Mhm.
smells and lights and people talking, and like he was running around everywhere.
Right.
That he just crashed in the middle of the dance floor. Poor
Sweet
guy.
dog.
Yeah,
Yeah, weddings are a lot.
clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to that expectation that we have of like our dog should be our constant companion.
Yeah.
And they should want to do whatever we're doing, and they should behave a certain way when
Mhm.
we're in these situations. And we take them out to dinner and they should just sit there calmly. Like that's not always going to happen, maybe
Yeah,
never happens, sometimes it
yeah.
does.
Mhm. And that's okay. It's
And
okay to
that's
have your dog at
okay.
home for
Yeah.
that. It's okay for your dog to have different preferences,
Yeah.
different
And
needs.
it's also okay for it's okay if your dog has reactivity. Like you can work around it. It doesn't make them a bad dog. I
Right.
know one of the biggest things for me as a people pleaser with Duchess's behavior is that I'm a terrible, like she's terrible. I'm terrible. I
Mm,
didn't raise her right. what's wrong with her, like going into
Mhm.
this whole narrative, instead of just being like, you know what, this is the way she is and we're going to work with it, we're going to work around it. um she's amazing like 95% of the time, and this like 5% is really difficult. I mean, even my friend today that was holding her was like, she's a great dog, and I was like, are
Mhm.
you serious? She's nuts. And then but I realized that's from my perspective, right? Like,
Yeah,
she is a great dog.
right.
And she, for example, had no reactive behaviors in the last 2 days that my friend thought, oh, she's cuckoo, you
Mm,
know?
yeah, yeah. I think so many times we're worried about how our dogs make us look. Like when
Mhm.
Muggins has reacted, especially to like pulling or barking at another dog or jumping on somebody who's like trying to come close to us. I'm just like, oh my goodness, what do they think of me? I must be, especially being a dog professional. It's like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, how no one's gonna hire me.
Yeah.
That's my dog
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
this. Yeah, but it's, everybody is, I mean, just because you are a dog professional, that doesn't mean your dog is perfect all of the time. There's no such thing as perfection, and it's okay if you make a mistake or your dog makes a mistake. These are opportunities to learn and to just recognize what is the trigger, what is the distance I need to keep, how can I help myself better next time.
Yeah. And how can I, I love that your one of your tips of, if your dog does something you don't like, of saying, well, thank you for protecting me, or thank you for
Mhm.
letting me know that there's somebody outside, and trying to reframe their behavior also. And also, it's okay to not like certain things about your dog, the same way it's okay to not like certain things about your partner and certain things about yourself and your kid. Like, this again goes back to this nuance that people seem to feel very uncomfortable with, but I believe, like, to be a more well-rounded person, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, even physically,
Yeah.
that it's important to live in the nuance and to live in the gray. And it might feel out of control, but at the end of the day, like, the accepting that is actually what's going to help us feel less anxious and help
Mhm.
dogs feel less anxious.
Definitely. Yeah, accept your own nuance and accept your dog's nuance, and just, recognize that it's information. The behavior is information for you. Your reaction and your anxiety is information for you about how safe you feel or unsafe you feel in certain environments. And it's okay to feel that way.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's a great place to end,
I think you're right.
personally.
Yeah.
Doesn't get any better than that.
Totally. So
Uh,
I'm gonna take us through an aftercare tip.
we'll see if Dutchie.
So this is
Dutch.
a tip about practicing deep breathing with your dog. Breathing intentionally can, especially in a way that is slow and deep, can help turn your nervous system, or turn the parts of your nervous system on that help you rest and digest. And this is effective for both humans and dogs. And I find it's helpful to do this every day, just as a way for your nervous systems to practice being in a calm state so that you can find that state more easily.
Okay.
And so
Love
all you're going to do is sit down if you're not already. And if you want to sit somewhere that your dog can join you, like a couch that they go and lay on, or even near their dog bed, you can do that. You can also think of this as a training activity. So if you had treats and you wanted to reward your dog for laying next to you or breathing deeply, you can do that. And this can help them think about and learn to regulate their own nervous system with breath. So you're just going to sit comfortably. You can call your dog over if they want to. A lot of dogs will just come over to you when you're doing this. I like to put one hand on my heart and one hand on my belly. And if you want to close your eyes, you can, or you can leave them open. And you're just going to start by listening to the sound of your breath. And see if you can breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And if your dog is coming over to you and they sit or lay down near you, go ahead and give them a treat. And as you're breathing, pay attention to the hand that's on your belly and see if you can make that hand rise up by pushing your belly out when you breathe in. That's going to help you to take a deep, full breath. And then your belly is going to fall and your hand will fall as you breathe out. And if your dog does anything that demonstrates more relaxation, like maybe they put their head down or they turn their hips sideways, or you hear a really audible exhale, go ahead and give them a treat. And go ahead and take one more inhale through your nose. And exhale through your mouth. And return your attention to your hands and wiggle your fingers. And when you feel ready, go ahead and open your eyes.
I'm so sleepy.
Yeah, I love that. Feeling really relaxed afterward.
Yeah, it was great.
Mhm.
We should do this every day so we can find time to do more breathing exercises.
Yeah, exactly.
All
All
right,
right.
that was great. I hope this was informative and enlightening for some people, and at the very least, I hope it makes people feel less alone, whether it's with a relationship with a reactive dog or about yourself and your own reactiveness and anxieties. Yeah,
You're not alone. We totally get you. We're there with you.
yeah, exactly. Hi, this is Angela.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and this is our afterthoughts conversation.
So, I listened to episode 2 again, and it's always so interesting to listen back to our conversations. I think one of the things that's the most exciting is I tend to really like them.
Mm,
And when I felt like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, maybe if, thinking after recording the conversations, when I listen back, I always feel, wow, I should have said that. And that actually sounded pretty good. So that's a really cool experience for me. I don't know if you have a similar one.
I do. Yeah, I always have such anxiety right after we record, and I'll be like thinking about specific things I said or didn't say. And I'm like, oh, I wish I did that differently. And then when I listen to the episode, I'm like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And I actually really like it.
I think that's also an insight into anxiety in general and our anxiety that usually we make things bigger in our head.
Mhm,
Yeah. But
definitely.
that being said, there were definitely some things in episode 2 that I would like to go over that I thought was interesting for myself. And I think we discussed it a little bit, which is what I love about our conversations, that we're dissecting and going through them and, even talking about things that we say previously
Mhm,
to take a deeper look at them. But one thing that I noticed in this particular conversation was the language that I use around Duchess because of my insecurities around her. So the one I can think of is, I jokingly will say she's crazy or cuckoo, or use this sort of, I guess it's cutesy but derogatory in some ways.
mhm,
And definitely not something that, we would call a human,
mhm,
especially nowadays because we understand that the language can be so harmful.
mhm,
And I think for me, I definitely have almost stronger insecurities around Duchess's behavior
mhm,
than my own, maybe because I haven't necessarily taken a look at them. the same way I've taken a look at my own behaviors. And yeah, so I think I just wanted to bring that up, and also maybe broaden the conversation about language and how important language is when we're talking about people, or talking about communities, or even talking about our own experiences. Um, and also, I do want to say disclaimer, like not to get caught up in the perfection of language, but just more about the curiosity of language. And, it's completely natural and normal to trip up over um, our language and how we say things. And like everything else, I think it's just important to look back at it and reflect. And if we want to make changes, make those changes moving forward.
Hmm. I so appreciate hearing that reflection, and I think I've totally done the same thing, especially with when Muggins is being reactive or doing something in a social situation that's really embarrassing. It's really easy for shame to come up, or to just feel like overwhelmed or embarrassed when the dog is like lunging or barking at somebody. And those situations are always so overwhelming, and they happen so fast that I think sometimes we're just trying to get through it, and so we're like trying to say something that kind of makes light of the situation, or like adds in a little humor, and then like we can just navigate it and get past it really quickly that way. But you're right, it's important to pay attention to what we're saying, and to also sometimes think about, why are we saying that, and is there a better way to deal with that shame or to navigate that situation, so that we can help ourselves to feel better about it and not be derogatory, and also help our dogs to improve so that they don't behave that way in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like with anything else, also, the more you say something, the more you believe it. And, the more that um, you gaslight another person or even your own dog, which came up in this episode too, that, Duchess is actually a really fantastic dog. And I can attest to, now that we've moved forward, that we've had several visitors and everyone is completely obsessed with her, and they say she's the best dog and they want to take her home. And, so it is also me gaslighting her in some ways, because she is really a wonderful dog and just has, like everybody else, behaviors that are, not the most desirable. Let's call it that way.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like you've changed something. There's something about how you're introducing Duchess to people, that is helping her to feel safe and helping everyone else to feel safe too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I really I love language. I really think about a lot about what I say, before and after, sometimes to anxious, unhelpful degrees. But I was also thinking about language with regard to this episode, because I remember when we recorded this episode, I had first was newly starting to use they them pronouns with Muggins. And at the beginning of the episode, I think I used a they pronoun to describe Muggins. And then as we continued with the episode, I didn't maintain it. And I didn't realize that at first, but when I went back and listened, I realized that I didn't maintain those pronouns. I didn't invite you or ask you to use those pronouns with Muggins. And Muggins doesn't care, dogs don't have gender, but I have come to feel more strongly about practicing they them pronouns with Muggins, both in the realm of practicing those pronouns so that it's easier for me to use them for my trans and non-binary friends, um, and to be able to practice advocating for them when other people misgender them or use the wrong pronouns. But I also think using they them pronouns with Muggins has helped me to just not put Muggins in this binary gender box, and to really think about how am I supporting Muggins in being able to be fully a dog, and not inhibiting that by thinking that Muggins is a boy.
Right. That's so, and again, this is so interesting. I'm just thinking about how one word can, there's so much behind it. And I think that's what's really interesting about language in general. We can just loosely use words or pronouns or whatever, and there is this whole other world, which is, I think that's how we're thinking about it. And, also in the next episode, we will talk more about they, them pronouns. So stay tuned for that. But I really love that we're coming back to this and that you are also saying, hey, like, I also struggle with this. And even though I am an advocate and an ally, this is something that is hard for me and I'm practicing. And I think that that is really important in today's world, because I think that many things have flipped to the other side with sort of the cancel culture of people feeling so afraid to say anything at all. And we can make mistakes, and that's okay. And it's about, just trying our best to utilize language in a way that is safe for people and also that is comfortable for people, in no matter what sense. So like we're talking about they them pronouns here, and I'm also talking about using sort of these derogatory terms for people with mental illness, for example, right? So there are so many words that we've used for stereotyping or for describing people in not so great ways that can be harmful. And they've become part of our vocabulary. So it's very difficult to undo that. And I think my wish also is that we just live in a world that's more understanding of the trip ups. And I'm really glad that we're highlighting that here and going back on it. Like we said, we're highlighting it right now. Okay, I made some, mistakes with my language. You made some mistakes with your language that you wanted to be different, and that's okay. And we're going to do better in the future.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having these types of conversations with me where we just reflect on ourselves and try to catch ourselves doing things that we want to improve on. And I just so appreciate the space that you provide for me to do that.
Me too. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope that this can be helpful for other people, reflecting on themselves and their own lives and the way that they speak and et cetera. So make mistakes with us. We're not perfect either.
Yes. No more perfectionism.
No
It's
more.
not real.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Stay tuned for episode 3.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Even though we are licensed professionals in our own field of work, Angela, LCSW, Sharon, OTD, and CDBC, this podcast is not intended to replace individual therapy for humans or behavior support for dogs. We approach our conversations from an exploratory, observational, and strictly personal lens.
If you are struggling with your mental health, your dog's behavior, or if you or your dog have experienced a recent traumatic event, please see the resources section on our websites for a list of resources and places that can help. Visit either www.hc-collab.com/happydoghappyhuman or www.clouddoodles.com/happydoghappyhuman. For additional show notes, including books and articles that we mentioned, please check out the footnotes section on our websites. This podcast is made possible by the collaboration between Cloud Doodles and Human Canine Collaborative. Check out our websites at www.clouddoodles.com or www.hc-collab.com. Special thanks to Tom Fox at Tom Fox Photos for support with editing and production consulting. You can find Tom at tomfoxphotos.com. Also, special thanks to sound effects and story examples from Duchess and Muggins. We could not and would not ever want to do this without you.